Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to present to you Sheikh Khaled Abou El Fadl.
Thank you very much. You're too kind. First and foremost, welcome everyone. I'm welcome you in the name of the Islamic Studies program at UCLA. And as I'll emphasize in my brief comments, it's an extremely positive thing that links are built between the typically stuffy, insular academic discourses that take place in various fields, but in this case Islamic studies, and the Muslim communities of different engagements and commitments. Progressive Muslim Identities is an important book at many different levels. All too often, we lock something as amorphous and larger than life, like any philosophical or religious idea that has transcendental power and has historical rootedness as well as futuristic potential. Any of these meta philosophical and religious traditions are all too often locked by their interlocutors, by those who engage them at a regular, quite often professionalized basis, whether they're locked into a set of texts and represented or allowed to speak through these particular texts, or locked within specific historical moments and allowed to be represented only through these historical moments, or in sort of a locked within a particular geographic identity, often the geographic identity of origin, and then represented from that perspective. All of it, yes, it's part of the cumulative knowledge that is necessary for the journey of knowledge, but it is very important to remember how limited and how risky this process of locking an amorphous and transcendental and meta idea within any of these specific manifestations, moments, or geographies. I mean, if in the same way that if you imagine something as when we say Islamic studies, there obviously, as I'm sure many of you would expect, there is a tendency to represent Islamic studies as basically the history of a very limited regional territory in the Middle East, the place of origin of Islam. But imagine if we did the same thing with the Jewish tradition or the Christian tradition or the Buddhist tradition or the Hindu tradition. And what history tells us is that often the place of origin becomes marginal to the story of these meta-phenomena that inspire human beings. And here is where progressive Muslim identities, and this type of book and the testimonies contained in this book, I think are quite important, because they get beyond the constraints of academic and intellectual methodologies, and present raw testimonials of actual living, breathing Muslims with all their complexities, with all the chaotic elements in living phenomena. The thing about an academic or a scholarly approach is that regardless of how much a scholar strives to present something in its full complexity, it is inevitable and unavoidable that the scholar would end up essentializing something that is far more complex. If they read 100 sources, rarely the 100 sources will say the same thing, but maybe 60 sources will say one thing, 5 sources say another 5 say another, and the scholar then sits and tries to make it all flow and put it in order and structure. But living testimonials, sort of raw anthropology or raw sociology, are wonderful because it is egalitarian. It allows a voice to people we often do not hear from. But beyond that, it is personal and truthful. When a person speaks from the heart and throws their heart out there and confronts the reader with a conscientious moment, a moment where either you have to reject the talk of the heart. It's like listening to a beautiful song. Every time I can't say beautiful song of music without remembering Ani, who has 2 CDs. I have not forgotten. It's like beautiful music that is played. You can either open your heart and allow it to enrich your soul, or you can sit and try to intellectualize this music within a genre, within scales, within a whole great mountain of details, and ultimately your intellect might have gone through an exercise, but your heart is left untouched. The only response to this book, the only appropriate response in my view, is to open your heart. And regardless of your ideological, intellectual, moral, methodological commitment, regardless of where you define Islam or Islam's position vis-a-vis the other, whatever the other is. The reality is that these are extremely honest testimonials, and it is remarkably arrogant to say that when someone speaks from the heart, that it does not matter. It does matter. And ultimately, Islam, whether it exists as a historical legacy or as a living phenomenon, is the sum total of all of these honest hearts that regardless of how much scholars, historians, philosophers try to make it fit within a mechanistic and structural, coherent discourse, is as rich and as chaotic as creation itself, and as rich and as wonderful and diverse as the God who created it, at least if you come from a believer's point of view. With that, I am sure that you're here to actually listen to the authors and to people who are far more entertaining than stuffy academic. So I won't keep you further. So I'll close with this point. I was quite excited when I was approached about Islamic studies sponsoring a talk for this book. And obviously, I don't need to say that the faculty of Islamic studies are about 20, 30 faculty, and so sponsoring the book does not, other than myself, I'm not sure how many faculty have even heard of the book or read it. But the point is that it is critical that the Muslim communities, that those who create the living legacy of Islam, engage and influence and enter into a critical discourse with those who study Islam at an intellectual level. It doesn't mean that one side has the right to instruct the other as to the truth, but there has to be a scholarly discourse that exists in isolation, in insularity, where scholars only speak to each other, very quickly could become largely a fallacy of a collective fictional account that has nothing to do with either living history or the lived sociological and anthropological realities. But scholars often, the same way that they tend towards books, and that's their natural inclination that God put in them, their doors need to be knocked, and their emails need to be bothered, and their phone numbers need to be called, and they need to be pulled into a discourse with those who their works affect the most. When the way that the history of India is portrayed, or the history of Egypt is portrayed, or well, ultimately, for those who actually live Islam, breathe Islam, raise their kids within Islam, are the ones who will have to bear the consequences of these various characterizations. So, kudos to the authors, good job, and I hope, in fact, one thing I thought about interpreting this book is that it's all too short. I wish it was much longer. And maybe you should think about a series. The testimonials are a quick read and enjoyable and fun. Some of them heart-wrenching, some of them irritating, but truthful. So, thank you very much.